have scary stories you are ready to share.
I started noticing that someone was living in my apartment, together with me. I moved into this apartment because of work. Nothing special. An old building, normal neighborhood, reasonable price. The owner said the previous tenant left urgently, but I didn't pay attention to it. The first few weeks everything was absolutely fine. I settled in, got used to the place, even started feeling comfortable. The first strange things were so minor that I blamed them on fatigue. For example, I always left my keys on the same shelf by the door. One time I came back. They weren't there. I found them in the kitchen. I thought, okay, maybe I put them there and forgot. Then it started repeating. Things changed places, not chaotically, as if someone used them and put them back, but not exactly. One evening I left a pot with food on the stove because I planned to finish it later. When I came back, it was washed. Not just covered, washed, dried and put away. I really froze then. I lived alone. No one else had keys. I even thought maybe the owner came in without warning. But that sounded too strange. After that, I started checking small things, deliberately leaving objects in certain positions. And almost every day something changed, not much. But enough to understand it wasn't coincidence. The worst happened when I decided to set up an old phone as a camera and leave it recording while I was at work. In the evening, I hesitated for a long time to watch. When I opened the video, the first hour's nothing. Then closer to noon, the door slowly opened, not forced, not broken, as if someone carefully unlocked it. A person entered the apartment, moved as if they knew the place well, didn't look around, didn't seem nervous. They went to the kitchen, opened the fridge, took something out, then sat down. Just sat for a few minutes, then got up, washed the dishes I'd left, adjusted the chairs and left. I sat and watched this video several times in a row. The scariest part wasn't that someone came in, but that they acted as if it was their ordinary day. That same evening I packed my things and left. I didn't even try to find an explanation. Because the feeling that you're not living alone, and don't know with whom, is something I never want to experience again.
I started getting calls from an unknown number, but he knew what I was doing right now. It started like ordinary spam. An unknown number called once, I didn't answer, then again. Then a few days later again. I didn't pay attention until one evening I accidentally answered. On the other end there was silence. I said hello a few times, then heard light breathing, and the call ended. It made me uneasy, but I decided it was just some weird joke. The next day he called again. I deliberately answered. This time there was a voice, very calm, almost indifferent. He said, "You are sitting in the kitchen right now." I stayed silent. Because it was true, I really was sitting in the kitchen. I thought maybe some friend was joking. I asked, "Who is this?" He didn't answer, just said, "You only have the light on in one room." And again, it was true. Inside me, the feeling of anxiety lit up. I started checking windows, doors, everything around. No one? The call ended. I tried to call back. The number didn't exist. After that, the calls started repeating, not daily, but regularly. And each time he said something he couldn't know unless he saw me. One time he said, "You are standing by the window right now." And I really was standing by the window. I started closing the curtains constantly, started turning off the lights. But it didn't help. He still knew. The culmination was at night. I woke up from a call, looked at the phone, the same number, I answered. And he said, "Don't turn around." Everything inside me tightened. I was lying facing the wall, and I realized that behind me was the room. I don't know how long I lay there without moving. I didn't turn around. I just waited until morning. The next day I moved out. I still don't know who it was or how it worked, but after that, I never answer unknown numbers again.
I realized I was being followed when it became too precise. It didn't happen suddenly. It started very slowly. At first, I just noticed the same car near my building, an ordinary grey car, nothing special. It was parked in different places, but almost always somewhere nearby. I didn't pay attention until one day I saw it near my office. I thought it was just coincidence. Big city, thousands of such cars. But then it started repeating. It appeared in different places where I was, near the store, near the gym, even once at the parking lot near my parents' house. And each time, the same car. I began memorizing the license plate, and it was the same number. At some point, I decided to check if it was just paranoia. I deliberately drove to a place I usually never go. Another district, another end of the city, and when I parked and got out, a few minutes later that car drove by. It didn't stop, just passed slowly. But I clearly saw the driver. He looked directly at me, without emotion, just looked, and drove on. After that, I really felt uneasy. I started changing routes, not going straight home, checking mirrors more often. And one evening when I was returning home, I saw that car parked right by my entrance. The engine was off, but someone was sitting inside. I didn't go home immediately. I walked past as if it wasn't my building and entered the neighboring entrance. I stood there for about 15 minutes. When I came out, the car was gone. I still don't know who it was or why, but after that I stopped feeling safe even in ordinary places, although I never saw that car again.
I got into a regular taxi and realized the driver wasn't going where he should. It was an ordinary evening after work. I ordered a taxi through the app. Everything standard. The car number matched. The driver was the same. Rating was fine. I sat in the back seat, gave the address, and we drove off. At first, everything was completely normal. The radio played quietly. The driver said nothing. I looked at my phone. After a few minutes, I noticed we turned somewhere different from the usual route. I thought maybe he knew a better way. That happens. But then he turned again and again, and I clearly realized this wasn't just a detour. I opened the map in the app. The route was different, much longer, and through an area I had never been to. I calmly said, "I think we're not going the right way." He didn't answer, just nodded and kept driving. "That was already strange," I repeated. He said, "There are traffic jams. I know a shorter way," but the tone was not quite normal, emotionless, as if he had said it many times before. I started watching the road more carefully. The area was getting emptier, less light, fewer people, and at some point I realized we were driving down a street with almost no houses. I felt anxiety rising. I texted my friend that I was in a taxi and sent my location. Then I told the driver more firmly, "Stop here." He didn't stop immediately. Drove another 100 meters and only then slowed down. I didn't wait for a full stop. I just opened the door and got out. He didn't say anything, didn't ask why I was leaving, just stared ahead. I stood on the road and watched the car drive away, slowly, as if nothing had happened. I ordered another taxi from there. Later, when I checked the route on the map, there was nothing logical for a passenger in the direction he was going, and I still think about what would have happened if I hadn't told him to stop. But I also don't understand why he stopped so easily and didn't try to follow me. It's lucky, I think.
I realized I had a regular customer who knew too much. I worked in a small shop where the same people came all the time. Nothing unusual. But there was one man who started coming too often. At first, I didn't pay attention. He bought small things, sometimes nothing, just looked around. But over time, I noticed he always came when I was on shift, always, and never when I wasn't. One day he came to the counter and said, "You finish later today, right?" Was surprised. I hadn't told anyone in the shop that. I asked how he knew. He just smiled and said nothing. After that he started saying even stranger things, like, "You don't live very far from here, right?" Or, "You usually go home not by the main road." And that's when I got really scared. I started changing routes, asked colleagues to walk me after shifts, and one evening I saw him on the other side of the street while I was going home. He didn't approach, just stood and watched. I pretended not to see and quickly went into the nearest open entrance. I stood there for about 20 minutes. When I came out, he was gone. After that I quit. Maybe it looks like exaggeration, but when someone knows things about you that you never told, that's not coincidence.
I agreed to a date and realized he knew more about me than he should. We met in a completely ordinary way, through social media. Nothing strange, shared subscriptions, a few common interests, normal communication. He wrote appropriately, not intrusive, no weird topics. After a few days, he suggested meeting. I agreed because everything seemed safe. We arranged a cafe in the center, a crowded place, nothing risky. When I arrived, he was already there. Looked even better than in the photos, greeted calmly, confidently, without tension. At first, everything was perfect. The conversation flowed easily, he joked, listened, didn't interrupt. But after some time, I started noticing small things that seemed too precise. For example, he said, "You usually take coffee without sugar, right?" I was a bit surprised, but thought it was a lucky guess. Then he said, "You often sit by the window in that cafe on the corner, right?" And that's when I got cautious, because it was true. And I had never posted that anywhere. I asked how he knew. He just smiled and said, "I'm observant." I felt slight discomfort, but decided not to overthink. Small city. Maybe he had seen me before. But then it got worse. He started saying things that couldn't be explained by coincidence. You usually go home by the street with fewer people. You don't like when someone walks too close behind you. You sometimes stop by that store even if you don't buy anything. I stopped smiling. I just looked at him, trying to understand if it was a joke. But he was completely serious. I asked directly, "Do you know me?" He replied, "A little more than you think." And that's when something inside me tightened. I started replaying the last weeks in my head. Had I seen him somewhere? Could he have been nearby? I said I needed to leave. He didn't try to stop me, just nodded and said, "Okay, I didn't mean to scare you." And that phrase sounded worse than everything before. I left the cafe quickly without looking back. And here's the worst part. I walked about 2 blocks and stopped at a crossing and felt someone behind me. I didn't want to turn, but did. It was him. He stood a few meters away, looking directly at me. I said, "You stayed at the cafe," he replied. "I knew you'd take this road." I felt cold inside. I crossed with other people and went into the first open shop. He didn't come in, just stood outside watching. I stayed there about 20 minutes until I called a taxi. When I came out, he was gone. I got home, locked myself in, and couldn't calm down for a long time. And here's what still scares me. He wasn't aggressive. He didn't threaten. He didn't do anything obviously wrong. But he knew my route, my habits, my small routines that even friends don't always notice. And the worst part, he acted like it was completely normal. I deleted all accounts, changed my number, started walking different routes. And I still sometimes think, if he knew all that, how long had he been watching me before he wrote the first time?
I agreed to give an acquaintance a ride, and it was the biggest mistake. It was late in the evening, around 11. I was already driving home after work when an acquaintance texted me, someone I'd met a few times in a shared company. We weren't close but communicated normally. She wrote that she was stuck on the other side of the city. The taxi was taking too long, and asked if I could give her a ride. I hesitated a bit because it was out of the way, but agreed. Nothing. Suspicious. I drove up. She got in the car. She looked a little tense. But I thought it was just the late hour. We started driving, and at first everything was fine. The conversation was short, a bit awkward, but nothing strange. After a few minutes I noticed she kept looking in the rearview mirror, not at me, but back at the road. I asked if everything was okay. She said, "Yes, just checking if anyone is following us." I smiled, thought it was a joke, but she didn't smile. Then I looked in the mirror too. There was a car behind us. Nothing special, just driving. I said it was normal, nothing strange. She didn't answer. After a few minutes, she asked me to turn not onto the main road, but into the courtyards. I asked why. She said, "It's faster." But it wasn't faster. It was longer and darker. And that's Almbat. That however, when I felt uneasy, I looked in the mirror again. The car turned with us. I said it. She got even more tense and said, "Okay, let's take another way." I started changing the route. The car behind did too. And then it really felt wrong. I said, "Maybe it's just coincidence." She replied, "No, It's not coincidence. After that the car was silent, I felt the tension rising. She asked me again to turn, this time into an even narrow street. I didn't want to, but did. The car behind disappeared. We both noticed it, she exhaled and said, "Okay, take me to the nearest crowded place." I was surprised, said her home was in another direction. She replied, "I'm not going home." And that's when things really didn't add up, I asked directly. "What's going on?" She was silent for a few seconds, then said, "I'm not sure it was just a car. They've done this before." I felt cold inside. I didn't ask more, just drove to the nearest gas station where there was 8 light and people. She got out quickly, didn't even say goodbye properly, just said, "Thanks for stopping," and went inside. I drove home, and here's the worst part. About 10 minutes after I left, I saw that same car in a mirror. It was following me, not close, but close enough for me to recognize it. And at that moment, I realized something very simple. She wasn't checking if someone was following us. She knew. And maybe those people weren't following her. They were following the one who agreed to give her a ride. I didn't go home right away. I drove around the city for another hour until I was sure no one was trailing me.
In childhood, I thought it was just a game, until I realized someone really came at night. I was about 9, 10 years old when it started. We lived in a private house on the outskirts of the city, quiet area. Almost all neighbors knew each other. I had my own room on the second floor with a window to the yard, and it was this window everything was connected to. At first, it looked like ordinary childhood imagination. Sometimes I woke up at night and thought someone was in the yard, not right by the window, but further near the fence. I saw a dark silhouette and thought it was just a shadow or a tree. I didn't tell anyone because it didn't seem real. Then it started repeating more often. I woke up and looked out the window, and almost every time it seemed someone was standing there, and each time the figure was a little closer. I began to fear looking out the window at night, but curiosity still won. One time I deliberately woke up and looked, and this time I saw it clearer. It wasn't just a silhouette, it was a person, standing still and looking toward the house. I didn't see the face. Only a dark figure. I hid under the blanket and lay there until I fell asleep. In the morning, I tried to convince myself it was a dream, but a few days later, something happened I couldn't explain. I woke up from a quiet sound, like something creaked, very softly. I opened my eyes and saw the window slightly open, not fully, just a few centimeters. I always closed it before bed. It was a habit because Mom always reminded me. I sat in bed staring at the window. Then I heard a sound downstairs, like someone carefully walking on the floor, very quiet, but I heard it. I didn't scream. I didn't move. Just sat and listened. After a minute, the sound stopped. I didn't dare leave the room, just hid under the blanket again until morning. In the morning, I went downstairs and said nothing to my parents. But I noticed one thing. The kitchen door, we always locked at night, was slightly open. I started paying more attention to details, and one day while playing in the yard, I went to the place near the fence where I had seen the person, and there in the ground were footprints. Not very clear, but they were there, like from shoes, and they led straight to the wall of the house. Under my window, I stood there staring, and for the first time really got scared, because it wasn't seams, it was real. That evening, I told Mom I wanted to sleep with her. She was surprised, but agreed. And the worst happened then. At night, I woke up and looked at the door of their room. It was slightly open, and I heard a sound from the hallway. The same quiet footsteps, slow, careful. I lay there, not breathing. And then I saw a shadow. It stopped by the door. I didn't see the person fully, only part of the silhouette. And they stood there for a few seconds, just stood, then slowly walked away. I don't know how long I lay after that. I didn't wake Mom. I didn't move. I just waited for morning. In the morning, my parents noticed nothing, as if nothing happened. But a few days later, we suddenly moved. They said it was because of Dad's work. I didn't ask then, but years later, I accidentally heard Mom talking to someone about that house. She said a phrase I'll never forget. Good thing we noticed it in time. I don't know what exactly they noticed, and I don't know how long it lasted, but I'm sure of one thing. It wasn't childhood imagination. Someone really came into our house at night.